TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
What are the key lessons True Royalty TV learned from launching their own SVOD service? What's happening at this year's Banff World Media Festival? And how do you deal with return to the office anxiety? Find out only on this week's TellyCast. This week, I'm chatting with True Royalty TV's Gregor Angus, Banff World Media Festival's Jenn Kuzmyk, and Fasttrack to Fearless's Tracy Forsyth. So the last few days have been frenetic when it comes to media merger news and rumours. And those who were predicting big M&A moves this year as the streaming wars start to heat up, it looks like they've been proven right. And here to discuss this and a host of other topics, including what's on the agenda for TV markets and conferences in the second half of the year, are Gregor Angus, founder and CEO of True Royalty TV, and Jenn Kuzmyk, Executive Director of Banff World Media Festival. Welcome to TellyCast, guys.
Thanks so much.
Good to be here.
Gregor, coming to you first. As the owner of an SVOD yourself, I'm keen to get your take on the Warner Media and Discovery Union. But before we go into that, tell us about your businesses, ABM and True Royalty TV.
Sure. ABM is really the holding company for True Royalty. There was a thought at the outset that we might have multiple streaming channels, but the Royals has us quite occupied, both the amount of content and activity as well as the voracious audience we seem to have. So we're pretty focused on True Royalty. It was really the coming together of the other two co-founders discussing how they could take Nick Bullen, one of the co-founders' content he'd been producing for years as an independent production company in the UK, direct to consumer, go digital, sort of open up the second half of his career. And of course, that all made sense, but they weren't sure how to do it. I'd been working in the Nordics and Germany, helping an SVOD launch there, and I'd learned about all the things you don't do, which was handy. So the mistakes were made elsewhere, and I was introduced to Nick, and the rest is sort of history. We went gently without building fancy tech, without producing a whole bunch of content and overpaying for licensing, just to really see if there was an audience, dipping a toe in. And as we've gone along the way, at each point, the validation has been very, very strong. So it's gone great. We launched in the summer of 2018, pilot direct D2C service, and since then we've obviously that sort of confirmed our hypothesis, and we've added distribution with the likes of Comcast, Cox, Sling, the Roku channel, and now Amazon channels.
Right. Okay. And are you able to tell us how many subscribers you currently have?
I can't tell you how many subscribers we currently have. I can tell you we add anywhere between 2,000 and 6,000 a month, but that's about to accelerate given the reach of Amazon and sort of the frictionless conversion it represents. But I can tell you that approximately half of our base is D2C and half is via partners. That's likely to become, the proportions will probably shift to more to partner subs with the addition of the Amazon distribution.
I'm sure a lot of TV execs out there have thought about great ideas for SVOD services serving niche audiences and passionate audiences, which is obviously the key. But you're one of the only businesses that have actually gone and launched one and gone and done that. Now, when it comes to serving that niche audience of royal fans and royal watchers, how does True Royalty's viewer behavior, do you think, differ from that of a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or a broader SVOD service? Or do you think they might be broadly the same?
Oh, there's definitely similarities, but we focus on really the differences and where people start. And people don't start by sitting down saying, I'm going to turn on the royalty channel, because there's never been one. So we went fishing really where the royal fans were. You can think of the various publications or the social communities that have already preformed. There's massive interest. I mean, many publisher organizations and other businesses have, basically thrived on the back of all the great royal storylines for decades. So this just really was the right thing to do in this era, to say, to look at that fan base through the global lens, which you can now do, and the video lens, and how would you provide a business for that? How would you monetize that? How would you serve that new unserved need? And that's what we went about doing. One of the things that fascinated me was as we wrote up the business plan, was the size of the brand, which really represents not just its sort of financial value, but obviously how many people actively consume it and interact with it, the dimensions to it, and that's been just the British Royals alone. At the time, it was ranked the 4th biggest brand in the world after Amazon, Google, and Apple, ahead of brands like Coca-Cola, Walmart, all the car brands, Samsung. Had quite an amusing meeting in the Samsung offices saying, you guys aren't bad, you have a pretty big brand, but the British Royals are bigger. So it's, it wasn't like this really marginal niche. It was a very active fan base, actively consuming this content. And there was obviously a new generation of royals. And then we've also taken it through the international and historical lens as well. So we don't just talk about William and Kate, we talk about Henry VIII, we talk about the Romanovs, Thai royals, and so on and so forth. And it's sort of endless as you go around the world and back through time.
For our international listeners, because we have lots of listeners from right around the world, the gateway content, if you like, is presumably the British royal family, but actually you have content that focuses on royal families around the world, or is it mainly Brit focused?
No, we do. We have Japanese emperors, maharajas. We have Nordic, Spanish royals, and we're very actively now adding to that part of the library. But it will be as we go beyond the current countries we're active in, which are Canada, Australia, the UK, the US, New Zealand, and Ireland, very Anglophile. As we go into other countries, we won't just expand sort of from volume, we'll expand monarchies and add dimensions to the content.
Now, as you touched on just there, one of the benefits of running an SVOD focused on royalty is that there's no shortage of real-world royal news. And obviously, the Crown probably doesn't harm things either. How has Megxit and the Duke of Edinburgh's passing recently, how's that affected subscriptions and viewing and traffic and overall interest in true royalty?
I think on demand is a great word for the era you're in, because it's really whether or not you're in demand. As we're not getting presented by any broadcasters in a schedule. It has to be when there's demand for what we're doing or what we are or who we're talking about. And taking Prince Philip's passing, or as you say, all the noise around the Oprah interview, and ever since then, there's just an incredible demand for that kind of content. And so we've tried to align our marketing push towards that demand, and we're operating much more in bursts. And we operate the business obviously on the cost of acquiring each and every subscriber. And that went down 2 to 3-fold through the period of March and April. We were bringing in, 2 to 3 times the volume of subscribers. They were costing us half to a third of what they would typically cost. So we didn't have to do fancy, complicated marketing. We would just put out trailers to some of the Prince Philip documentaries or some of the stuff around the backstory to Harry, and it's incredible how people it was just exactly what they were looking for. That was the mood they were in, and we don't necessarily do that in a TV environment. We do that in a social media environment, which is a natural place, or a news environment on the web with publishers or otherwise.
Well, I guess from your perspective, keep your fingers crossed for more and more royal news, like more and more Oprah interviews or similar pieces of activity.
Well, they never let you down, as my partner says. It's the gift that keeps on giving in many ways. There's just so many fascinating characters with so many fascinating stories, and soon there'll be a whole new generation. And if you look at George and Charlotte, they're going to be pretty interesting characters themselves. So there's a lot of runway.
And speaking of royal news, now, last week saw the publication of a damning report into the BBC's world-shaking Martin Bashir, Princess Diana interview for Panorama. And it found that the interview was obtained by a campaign of fraud and deception. And the royal family itself has been swift, unusually so, unusually vocal in its response, with the Duke of Cambridge blaming the BBC's failings for fueling his mother's paranoia, worsening his parents' relationship. And it said that interview should never again be broadcast. What are your thoughts on the Bashir interview? And do you think it should ever be aired again?
Well, I think it's a horrible situation. And any time something is done in a morally questionable way or lacking basic human or business ethics, it's not really acceptable. It's ultimately for profit or fame on the back of doing something crooked. So that's sort of where I stand on that one. It's not okay. Now to think about the product of that and showing it to the world again, it's already out there in many places where you could probably see some of it or all of it even. But to actively be broadcasting that as an event, to show that interview with that purpose, I think is probably wrong. I think to have it more as part of a case study of how not to behave and to abuse of people in the media would be interesting. Outtakes of it to provide as content, use it as a case study, as one of my colleagues had suggested in a conversation I was having with him. I think that would make sense. But to make an event of it again, I think is probably not very correct.
Yeah, and that's what Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC, was saying this morning, is that, they don't intend to broadcast it again in its entirety. But, clips of that interview are important, I think, for context, even in the context of showing that it was obtained by fraud and deception. It's important to keep that as library, I think. But it's a fascinating and, fairly damning indictment of that interview, and obviously it caused a huge amount of damage, and I'm sure a lot of that is reflected on True Royalty when it comes to programming. Coming on to the news last week of this Warner Media spin-off and the merger with Discovery to create this new content powerhouse. As an SVOD yourself, how are you looking at this? Do you think that it's going to affect you in any way? And how do you think it's going to affect the wider streaming wars?
I think it's very exciting, and it's sort of right on schedule. As you said at the top of the call, a couple of years ago, we were thinking, oh my goodness, it all looks like they're going to try and make the shift to streaming and do that migration without their businesses collapsing. Then, of course, COVID hits and they entered the market and things got accelerated. The behavior, the curiosity to try the various new streaming channels was there. The time was there to do it at home. So everything accelerated. And of course, what was predicted in the following year is exactly what's begun now, the consolidation. And there will be more of it. I think the big tech giants are going to be right in the middle of it. I read that Malone was predicting that Discovery and Warner could be third or even second in the mix with Netflix and Disney. But I wouldn't look too far past Apple, Google, and Amazon. I have a funny feeling they're going to be in a mix, and they'd be probably, as we read, there might be an announcement as soon as today about Amazon's plan. So I think it's exciting. I think it's accelerated the behavior of understanding actually everything that's out there and how it can be consumed now. I think people jumping around their smart TVs from from setting to setting and firing up apps and navigating Amazon channels or otherwise is now becoming second nature to very quickly to a much broader demographic. So all of that stuff's great for us because it's the shift to streaming. It's the shift to having your personalized on-demand choice of content that's happening, which plays into what we're providing to the people that are interested in what we have. Alongside of that, we've had to go very fast to obviously work on the content, but to get the distribution in place, which has been the big part of what my focus is. And, I suspect that in 18 months, after the sort of the nuclear war has played out a little more, and there's been a little more consolidation, we'll be in a place where we become quite interesting to be partnered with or even invested in or acquired by whatever we'll be calling these companies by then, whether they're Netflix, Amazon, whatever Discovery Warner becomes. If
Apple
they're not,
Flix, maybe.
Apple Flix or Comcast, AMC, Viacom, or I wouldn't, as I say, I wouldn't count out Apple or Google too quickly.
And so from your perspective, it's kind of a rising tide lifts all boats, right? I mean, it's all about getting people into the habit of accessing content via subscription services, via different devices and apps, and just getting them used to watching non-linear TV.
That's right. It's just been an accelerator. And it's one of the premises of the business, but it's been an accelerator. And everyone at the same time figuring out how to get Disney Plus sort of taught them how to do it. So then if they did decide that they wanted something called True Royalty, they know how that works.
There's lots of great ideas out there. There's lots of niches. There's lots of, passionate fans of certain things, whether it's music or whether it's whatever type of pursuit. And lots of execs must be thinking about launching an SVOD. But what are the key lessons that you've learned since launching True Royalty? And what would be your advice to those thinking of starting their own SVOD in a particular area?
It's quite normal to come from a place where it's production and the contents come from a production world where they've produced amazing stuff of all sorts of flavors and types and genres, but they don't necessarily aggregate up into a clear proposition, right? And ultimately, when there's going to be a whole bunch of a la carte channels, what streaming channels are, like ours anyway, is you have to have a brand in front of it. And the brand has to simplify the selection process, the buying process, the decision process, say, what do I want to watch now? Oh, I love the Royals. You can go find Royal content in quite a few places with Viacom, with Discovery, with Netflix, with Amazon. But if you're genuinely a fan for that, like I am for tennis, and if I feel like watching a tennis match that's happening in Shanghai, I like to have tennis TV available to me when I want it on demand. And it's exactly the same kind of relationship. So I think you've got to have a crisp proposition, which becomes your brand. And that needs to be aligned to a sizable, addressable, and serviceable market. So there's a bit of a marketing piece in there, which has been missed along the way. There've been great tech people that have come together with great content people, but they've had the luxury in the past of having a broadcaster who brought them basically they're marketing machines. They bring you distribution, they bring you an audience, they bring you ad dollars, they fund the thing. And all of that is removed from the equation. And you say, it's fine, they'll just subscribe and pay. Well, you've got to find them. You've got to get them over the line. You've got to find them in volume. It's a huge marketing piece. And that's where I think my meeting Nick has been great, because he's been very much about the content. He's been reliant upon broadcasters and some of the new streamers in the past, but now he's able to go find customers, because I come from more of a marketing world, and we're a good match.
Presumably, discoverability, as you mentioned, is really, really important when it comes to SEO, when it comes to marketing in app as well. All of that are the skills that are really important for a new SVOD to have.
You've got to earn your way. You have to pay a little bit up front to get yourself established, but then it's really about generating the content. And as you say, having your SEO and everything humming away so that you have some organic strength among all the other content options that are there.
One more question before we move on to Jenn. I was just wondering, how much content do you think you need? Is there a magic number of hours that you might need before launching a service? Let's assume it has a passionate fan base. Now, I think you've been very smart, obviously, in going towards royal programming because, as you say, it's universal and it has an extremely strong brand. What would you say is the minimum amount of hours that you need to be able to create a strong consumer content proposition?
Great question. One we thought a lot about. We had some help along the way as we started to interact with some of the distributors that were to carry us because they had some conditions. But we said to ourselves, if we have 150 hours, 150 titles at launch of the pilot, it's enough to show the breadth and depth and give people sort of an idea of what our intention is as a channel. And we said we're really trying to be a secondary service, to general interest, a guilty pleasure. Maybe when my husband is watching the NFL in Texas one afternoon, I might pick up my iPad and watch a documentary about Diana. And we said, wouldn't that be cool if, a bit like National Geographic, once or twice a month, you picked up that month's edition for an hour or two or three and had a bit of an escape, if it had that kind of a relationship? Well, that's worked, but we had the problem that in the first holiday season, it was the Christmas of 2019, some of these very households in Texas were watching 7 hours a week, and we'd sort of planned for 3 hours a month. And we said, oh my God, we have
burning through all your catalog.
Yeah, we have super fans, right? So we went from 150 to 250 and recently over 400. We went from refreshing 5 hours a month to now we're refreshing 20 hours a month with a greater proportion that's exclusive. So those are all the dials we're turning up. Volume, we're not trying to stockpile content, but you need to have volumes of content because we have some long-term subscribers that aren't showing any signs of wanting to churn. You have to increase the exclusivity so that people want to keep coming back and have specific reasons to. And then you need to refresh monthly. So it's just a constant sort of buzz, even when there's not these big external events.
And you're obviously creating your own original content, but are you accepting pitches from third-party producers for content, or are you sourcing most of your other content through finished programming through distribution deals?
No, we're a bit of everything. So we're buying more exclusive rights. We're producing more ourselves. We're commissioning more. We're taking pitches. As I say, we're broadening the net in terms of monarchies and dimensionalizing. We're even got some drama coming in related to some older drama related to true royal stories, etc. So it's we're dimensionalizing the content and up for any great content coming our way.
Jenn, thank you for coming on the show. Welcome to TellyCast. Now, you're executive director of Banff World Media Festival. Now, as I was saying just before we came and started recording, I've seen the publicity shots of the venue, of the surrounding. It looks amazing, but I've never made it to Banff. But I've often thought of tagging it onto a trip. If I've been to Real Screen West, for example, I've always thought, Banff is usually after that, the week or so after. But before we go into the detail of the event itself, tell me, what have I been missing?
Well, yeah, you know what? Banff is probably the most beautiful place on the planet. And what we like to say at the festival is that we need to, in terms of the programming, in terms of the people that come there, in terms of the experience that our delegates have, we have to live up to that view. And, which is second to none. And I like to think that the festival is second to none. This is the 42nd year of the Banff World Media Festival. And it has always been a place and continues to be a place where key figures in the media industry come together with the wider industry. You build relationships, you discuss pressing issues, do business, and also, of course, celebrate the best programming in the world. And that's part of our Rocky Awards. I think you've been missing, the legacy, perhaps, in the early days. everyone from, Sir Laurence Olivier, Gregory Peck, Bob Newhart, Kate Adie, Walter Cronkite, Sir David Attenborough, all the studio heads. And then today, some of the most prominent executives and creators gather in Banff, whether it be in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains of Canada, or virtually these last couple of years. So this year we have, speaking at the festival, Ted Sarandos, Tim Davie, Ava DuVernay, Maverick Carter, Kevin Feige, Simu Liu, really just, and that's just a taste. It really is a coming together of some of the biggest names in the industry, but also some of the most exciting up and coming creators, directors, showrunners, writers, all coming together. And it's a place where conversations happen and where relationships are built.
It sounds like the Davos of TV. Tell us a little bit about the heritage, if you like. So how did it start and how did the festival grow? Was it purely TV, or is it film as well? Or is it purely on TV? And if so, what kind of genres of TV does it focus on?
Well, yeah, it is. And when we say TV, that pretty much means anything on any screen, anywhere, anytime these days. And I will certainly say, yes, it was initially called, in 1979 launches, the Banff Television Festival, renamed to the Banff World Media Festival, over a decade ago, I think, just to encompass everything that is on screens. And now, even more so, the festival is certainly very squarely centered in what we traditionally would call television series, but also features, one-offs. And more and more conversations around the festival, especially this year, are being centered around film, around feature films, or around with all the windows collapsing and the way that the industry is going, and how the streamers have impacted the industry. It's a screen is a screen and eyeballs are eyeballs. So I would say that Banff definitely encompasses everything on every screen. We even sometimes get into gaming and the discussion around advertising and marketing in the industry too. But I think at its very core, it is about the creation of new content. That is something that really differentiates Banff from almost anywhere else. There are other markets and conferences in the world that are often focused on finished programming, or there's a large contingent of finished programming sales that happen. And while that does happen at the festival, absolutely our unique position in the industry is that it is an ignition point for new partnerships and new content that comes together with that melding of both the creative and the business sides of the industry.
Right. So it's the place to pitch.
It is the place to pitch. Absolutely, for sure.
Well, we'll talk about that again in a second. But obviously, Banff in a beautiful, beautiful environment. Unfortunately, we're still living in COVID times. Some of us are sort of exiting lockdowns faster than others, and obviously Canada's had issues with COVID, just like everywhere else on the planet. You presumably ran last year's event as a digital only, and that's the same this year, right?
That's correct. We found out, really weeks before the festival last year that it was going to be something that we were going to have to cancel, like so many other events around the world. And we did, and we pivoted. And I'm really super proud of what we created last year, which was an outstanding program of both meetings and, speakers, masterclasses, panels, et cetera. I'd say if last year was about building the plane while we were flying it, this whole past year has been about building a better plane.
Right.
So it is the second year of the virtual festival this year. And I'd say that tenet holds true. We still in this environment want to hold up to what Banff is and what it's meant to be, and to that the standards of that incredible place and view. And so I think we've built a program that exemplifies that.
It's the place to pitch. And we've found that as everybody, can't meet up in person, then actually virtual pitching has been successful to a certain extent. I think people have just made it work through necessity. And actually, some people that we've had on the show over the past few months have found that they were able to access execs that they'd never usually be able to access and pitch to. So there have been some benefits in some places. What have you learnt then from year one in terms of a digital event, digital Banff? What have you learnt that you're going to be implementing this year to improve the experience for delegates?
I think what we learned is that we have to stick to the heart and soul of what we do. We know our value proposition, and which for Banff is bringing people together for inspiration, for creativity, and for business to meet. And so with every single decision that we've made in creating, this virtual conference platform, which we've put incredible resources into over the last year, and I think it really is unique to anything out there in the world, frankly. But it's all been centered around what we all need, which is networking, new relationships, facilitating meetings. And it's interesting. I was listening to this podcast, an episode a couple of weeks ago, talking about what we're all missing. We're all missing those sort of happenstance meetings when you're walking down the Croisette or at the bar at a conference. And I think one of the things that we've created is this amazing virtual delegate lounge that is sort of drop in, but also we're programming meetups and events around, scripted, or come meet the Rockies nominees, or I'm a producer looking for a distributor, I'm a writer looking for a producer, those kinds of things that aren't just, we have thousands of preset meetings that you can sign up for to meet with buyers and pitch and do all of those things, but also this whole platform where you can request video meetings with each other. And then this delegate lounge that does really aim to replicate that experience of, just happenstance meetings that can lead to an amazing conversation and a new relationship and new projects being born.
So in practical terms, if I'm on your platform and I can see, and I'm a producer, let's say, and I can see a commissioner is actually in the lounge at the same time, I can potentially, virtually go up and grab them. How do I recreate that happenstance situation that you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So that delegate lounge is just one aspect of what we're doing at the festival. But you come into the lounge. There are tables with chairs. You can pull out a chair. You can see everybody that's in there. You can, if I see your little icon in where you can look at who's in the room, virtually in the room, I can just message you and say, hey, Justin, been dying to talk to you. Why don't you come meet me at table 4? And we can go and have a seat at table 4 where we each pull a chair and we have a chat. It's really that simple. And we've also replicated something really interesting. When we have those really big keynotes and panels, and this year we've got some amazing ones with Ted Sarandos and Maverick Carter and Kevin Feige and Channing Dungey and just Tim Davey, really incredible speakers. And when we have those and you take in that kind of content, that kind of thought leadership, those discussions, and then the content's done, oftentimes in a virtual environment, you sort of shut down that tab on your browser and you sit there and think about it. But what we're doing is immediately after those big sessions, we automatically, without having to do a thing, you're directed into the delegate lounge and you can be there and take a seat and sort of replicate that feeling of walking out. For us, it's the Cascade Ballroom, which is our main stage at Banff. You can replicate that feeling of talking to somebody. Wow, what did you think about that? I don't agree with that. I do agree with that. I'm going to go talk to them. So we're doing everything we can to try and give people that thing that we've been all missing.
Tell us about the makeup of the delegates by country, if you can. Just a broad brush stroke. Presumably it's mainly North American delegates that you get. Can you give us an idea of how many Europeans or how many Asian delegates you may get?
Yeah, so it is called the Banff World Media Festival. We have typically in the in-person festival, and that's actually replicated in the virtual, we have, 20 to 25 countries that are represented amongst our delegates. So it truly is international. The Rocky Awards, we have 37 countries that are participating in the Rocky Awards. That said, the mix of delegates, I would say, is probably a little more North American. But we do have great representation. This year we have some delegations from Ireland and from Israel in sort of en masse in particular. But we have, people there truly from across Europe, across Asia that are at the festival, all there with, looking for co-productions. And I think a thing about Banff is that we do attract a lot of American buyers, a lot of development executives from the streamers, from the US networks and studios are there, and that's no different this year. And I think that the European producers in particular are sort of realizing that this is a really great entree into that market.
You're saying I can pitch to Netflix at Banff?
Well, you and everyone else who wants to pitch to Netflix. It's no different than any other festival. We're not going to guarantee anyone any meeting with any executive. I shouldn't say that. We do. We have over 1,400 guaranteed preset meeting slots that you sign up for, and it's sort of a lottery system, and you get those. But that said, on the whole platform, it's kind of like a LinkedIn style platform where everyone has a profile, and you can certainly reach out to them very easily and try and set a meeting. You have to be, sort of worth your salt in terms of what you're bringing to the table to secure a meeting with Netflix or anybody else. And that's no different.
And tell us when the event is, because we haven't spoken about dates, and how do people access Banff?
Well, the festival is taking place over the course of a month this year, from June 14th to July 16th. And people can get passes to the festival. We have two types of passes this year. We have a content pass where you can take in all of those amazing panels and master classes and showrunner super panels and everything else, and a marketplace pass that really gives you the access to book those meetings, do those pitches, get into the delegate lounge. And that can all be accessed on the Banff website, which is banffmediafestival.com.
Right. Okay. And we'll put a link to both True Royalty and also Banff World Media Festival in the episode description. So anybody that's listening can go and click and have a look around and check them both out. And Jenn, just one final question about markets and conferences post-COVID, because, we're hoping now around the world that, the second half of 2021, we're going to start to see these events opening up a little bit. We're looking at NEM, MIPCOM, various other events are advertising real world and hybrid events, but certainly the opportunity to certain delegates to meet in person. In the future, it's probably too early to say, but do you see that the digital element of Banff will always be there now? Now you've built the plane, if you like. Will you always be offering online access to delegates as well as that real world event?
You know what? You're right. We can't tell exactly what the future is going to be at this point, but I think that what we have built in the virtual platform is meaningful. I think it's efficient. I think that it will survive, and I know it will. I know it's within our plans, although we do wholeheartedly plan to go back to an in-person event in the Rocky Mountains. And I can't really speak to the future of other events and what they're planning, and some might not survive. People are going to be more choosy about where they travel because they've discovered that some things that they used to fly to can be done without getting on a plane. But events that are truly a unique experience that really further business in an impactful and valuable way, something that you can't get anywhere else, those events will survive and they'll thrive. And I think Banff is one of those things. And I think the in-person and the digital will both be part of what the festival does going forward.
And now it's time for Gregor and Jenn to pick their stories of the week, the TV industry news items that have caught their eye in the past 7 days. Gregor, what's your story of the week?
My story is Amazon and MGM on the back of what's going on with Discovery and Warner. It's really going to heat up. And I suspect that that's not going to be the last of it. It's what I read last night, which is the story I'm referring to, is that it could be announced as soon as today. So I'm pretty excited to see the choice of putting $9 million into MGM rather than just into their own studio. If you think about that, as I did, I guess they're putting a lot of premium on brands like Bond, Rocky, Fargo, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and you name it. So it's going to change. If it goes ahead, it'll really change, I think, the stature of Amazon as a studio, obviously, and some pretty sexy entertainment brands.
But looking at the Amazon catalog, there's some great content on there, and obviously lots of Oscar-winning content on there. But equally, it is a bit patchy. But if you add in Bond, as you say, and all of those amazing, household name franchises, it does really elevate the business to something different. And I guess, Amazon's not short of a few quid. And if they want to get ambitious, then they can completely change the game. So that is going to be fascinating to watch. And we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. So you never know. By the time this comes out on Thursday, we may see some other news but we'll focus that on our TellyCast newsletter on Friday, so everybody can see that. And I'm sure that everybody have read the news anyway. Jenn, how about you? What's your story of the week?
Well, that probably is the story of the week. However, something else happened last week, which was the U.S. upfronts, and so I'm gonna focus on that story and some of the news that's been coming out of the upfronts, specifically, the openness of U.S. networks to be working with more third-party suppliers, co-producing with outside studios. I think that bodes well for the industry generally. I think whenever you diversify where content comes from, it just results in strength and better content. Studio heads were talking a lot last week at the upfronts about a commitment to diversity and inclusion, attracting and cultivating and retaining authentic, underrepresented voices. And this is a movement, not a moment. And it's not lost on me that this is the 1-year anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. And this is something that the industry as a whole has committed to. And I hope it's true. And I want to believe this is going to be an ongoing endeavor for the entire industry, and I just think that events like Banff are what we do. We have programs, our Diversity of Voices program with Netflix and our Banff Spark program. This year, we're going to have 300 Black, Indigenous, and people of color creators, producers at the festival, not newbies, accomplished, vetted, talented producers and creators. And if the studio heads and if the leaders of the industry are true and endeavoring to truly make change, I think being part of that and finding those new creators is going to be the key to it all. I really truly believe that the next Phoebe Waller-Bridge or next Michaela Cole is at Banff and is at other festivals, and I think it takes effort and intention, and I'd like to see that it actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll again post the links to both those stories on the episode description so you can go and check those out. If you haven't heard the news already, we'll see if something breaks between now and Thursday. And now it's time in the show where my guests get to nominate their hero of the week and who or what they're telling to get in the bin. Jenn, who's your hero of the week?
My hero of the week is Michaela Cole. The BAFTA Craft Awards were just handed out, and she obviously won for directing and writing. I May Destroy You is an incredible feat. She's done so much for women, so much for Black women in the industry. And so, yeah, Michaela Cole is the hero of the week for me, possibly year, decade.
Gregor, how about you? Who's your hero of the week?
Well, just to stay on the same theme that I've been on, I think to enable all this action happen, it's you could say it's David Zaslav or John Stanky, but I think it's actually John Malone who's given way to moving to one class of shares so that the merger could happen and this massive consolidation could begin. So he's my nominee.
And who or what are you telling to get in the bin, Gregor?
In the bin, I think it's Lukashenko and Belarus, and probably their friends that aren't too far away who look like they're trying to do anything they possibly can to control the media and the narrative, which is just mind-boggling.
It is. It's a little bit worrying. So we're hoping for a robust response, I think, to that, because you can just feel a little bit of creep coming in from the east in these certain areas, which is a little bit concerning. And certainly when it comes to free speech and democracy and journalism, it's very important at this time, to really underline that freedom of speech aspect.
Even their nearby neighbors throttling Google because they don't like the narrative is just, again, it's mind-boggling that you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, in the bin. Jenn, who or what are you telling to get in the bin?
Well, there are some similar themes, and I'm going to tread into Gregor's territory just a touch here. But I think in the bin is Martin Bashir, the bombshell surrounding the falsifying of the documents to secure that infamous interview with Diana. Obviously the BBC has taken responsibility, offered unconditional apology, but when things like this happen and are revealed, it can erode everyone's trust in venerable news organizations. And God knows we need to be able to trust in the integrity of organizations, like the BBC and others. And when you talk about journalism and integrity, I think that whole thing needs to go in the bin once it's properly dealt with, of course.
Absolutely. And you just know some of these regimes are just going to hold up this as a flag, aren't they? It's when it comes to the BBC's reputation, it's just such a shame for so many reasons. Okay, Bashir in the bin. Jenn, Gregor, thank you so much for your time and coming on the show. It's fascinating to hear about Banff World Media Festival, and all the best with True Royalty TV. Great to speak to you, and best of luck with everything that you're doing.
It's been lovely. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Justin. Great to meet you, Jenn. Good luck with everything.
Likewise. Take care.
And it's time to welcome my final guest of the week, Tracy Forsyth. Great to have you back on the show, Tracy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Everybody's starting to return to work, slowly but surely. Lots of people, we're hearing that people are returning back to their offices across the TV industry. Some are, some aren't, obviously, but everybody's different, and everybody's seems to be returning at different stages. Is that what you're feeling, Tracy? Is you hearing that from people?
Definitely. I've had so many different conversations with people, and everybody is feeling very differently. Some people are anxious about actually physically going into the office, and others have been expressing anxiety about what to say to each other. Like either they're feeling tongue-tied through lack of socializing in person from the last year, or they're feeling, oh, well, actually, I've had a really good year, but I feel awkward about actually admitting that and saying that to people in case they've had a terrible year. So there's a lot of sort of treading on eggshells when it comes to relating to other people, and also a lot of sort of physical uncertainty about, the environment, just being in different environments. And, some people I know have found it exhausting going out of the house and mixing and mingling with other people, coming home flopping out because they're not used to that level of engagement. So I think it's just really important to remember that it took us sort of well over a year to get into things and to adjust. So to not expect an instant transformation when we come out of it. And this past month or past 6 weeks, I have been planting loads of actual real life seeds in a little temporary, one of those pop-up greenhouses. Well, it's too big a word to say greenhouse. One of those little shell things with plastic over it in my backyard, because we have an allotment. We went on the council waiting list for 5 years and finally got an allotment. And so each year I plant loads of seeds and in the hope that they will grow. And then when they're big enough, put them out into the allotment. And what I was doing this the other day, and I have all these hundreds of little pots, and I plant lots of things, and I always think I'm going to remember what I planted where, and then don't. So it's always a bit of a surprise to me what actually comes up. And so this time I was just seeing the first few of the beans come up, and those little guys come up like in a little, they curl up a stalk and then 2 leaves unfurl. And even though I'd pretty much planted the same kind of beans, or the same beans from the same packet into the same trough, they were all coming up slightly differently. And I thought, God, isn't that interesting? Is that even though they were planted on the same day, they've been put under the same conditions, they've been watered the same amount, they had the same soil, they all come up differently. And it just made me think how much like those little seeds we are with regards our return to the new normal and the return to the working environment outside of our home. Is that some of us are shooting straight up, spreading those leaves and growing like the clappers, and others are, curling very, very slowly out of the soil, and some are still refusing to come up. I just took great inspiration from that to say, you know what, it's all absolutely fine. We are all very different. We all have a different approach. We all have a different feeling inside us about how to return to the new normal. And we are all going at our own pace. And if we are not feeling like cartwheeling down Old Compton Street, but rather sort of actually keeping the onus on working from home if possible, or avoiding the office, then that is absolutely fine. I think the thing is that we, like those little seeds, once they all come out in their own time and get planted, they are all likely to grow into, hopefully, big, strong bean stalks and produce the same type of beans. So they will all get there in their own time and reach the same destination. And likewise, whatever that destination for us is, whether it's just, and I think it should be sort of ensuring our own well-being and peace of mind, and our own physical and mental health should be the end. We will get there in our own time, and don't either feel pressured to be like somebody else and to feel that you should be, shooting out of your little pot. And the other way around is that don't feel that just because you are shooting out of your little pot that there's anything wrong with the people who don't want to go as fast as you do. So I think my big message is that, we are living organic beings in the same way that those little seedlings are. We all grow differently. And it's both to sort of respect yourself, respect your own desires and wants and needs, and also just to respect the desires and needs of other people.
It's a really good analogy, Tracy, because at the weekend I went to the football match for the first time in, I think it's about 14, 15 months. And I have to say that I was a little bit anxious when I was going through into the gates and going in there, and there was still only letting a few thousand people in. But a few thousand people after this amount of time is quite strange to be in that environment, and you're still very, very mindful of your own space. And people will no doubt feel that in different ways when it comes to, public transport. In London, we have the tube, obviously, and lots of different cities around the world have public transportation systems. And a lot of people might not quite fancy getting on those right at the moment.
No, yeah, and exactly it. I mean, I think if you think maybe how strange it was to go into lockdown at the beginning and look out of your front, look out of your window, your front door, and think, oh, there's no movement out there. In the same way that suddenly going into a large crowd or a busy place will seem alien at first. And so it's like not to put pressure on yourself, you just got to adjust. It's like when you come out of the darkness and you have to blink your eyes a few times before it gets used to the light. So go easy, unfurl your leaves at your own pace, and try not to be judgmental of others if they're not going at your own pace. So that's my message for today. So really, just get in touch with yourself, just do that. I don't know whether you remember my pause, process, proceed method, but it's just really to pause for a moment, almost like pat your hand on your chest and just work out what is going on inside you. Process your thoughts. What is it that you are really feeling? What is it that you're wanting? What is it that you're needing? And only then, once you've really thought about those things, then only then move to the proceeding part.
That's great. Tracy, from Fasttrack to Fearless, thank you so much for coming on the show again. Really good advice, and take it at your own pace. Well, that's it for this week's show. As always, thanks a lot for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to TellyCast and share it with friends and colleagues. And a quick reminder to sign up for our free newsletter called TellyCast Plus. It's packed with interesting TV industry stories of the week that you might have missed, downloadable reports and surveys, and exclusive insight and opinion, including The Secret Producer, our intrepid, anonymous, real-world exec, reporting from the front line of TV production. It's all completely free. Just visit our website to sign up at telecast-podcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. So, until next Thursday, as always, stay safe.